Under the light rain of Seoul, Yoon Soo-jin walked through the wet streets with her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her hands trembled as she held the envelope containing the photographs that changed her life forever. The images showed her husband, Kim Min-ho, intimately embraced with another woman in a luxury hotel in the Gangnam district. 3 years of marriage seemed to have dissolved in that cruel moment. Soo-jin remembered how she had met Min-ho at university, when they both studied business administration. He was the son of an influential family, heir to a large corporation, while she came from a humble family of merchants. The love between them had blossomed like cherry trees in spring, pure and promising. The 26-year-old woman had sacrificed her own professional dreams to support her husband's career. She gave up a job at a small graphic design company to fully dedicate herself to the role of the perfect wife, organizing dinners for Min-ho's important clients, and keeping the house spotless according to his family's expectations. When she arrived at a luxurious apartment where they lived, Soo-jin found Min-ho sitting on the Italian leather sofa, distractedly scrolling on his phone. He didn't even look up when she entered, drenched from the rain. His coldness over the past few months finally made sense. That night, Soo-jin couldn't sleep. Lying next to the man who had betrayed her trust, she felt the weight of silence between them. Min-ho slept deeply, as if nothing had happened, as if his world hadn't collapsed just a few hours earlier. In the morning, he prepared for work as he always did, putting on the navy blue suit she had chosen for him, wearing the tie she had given him as a birthday gift. The normalcy of the routine cruelly contrasted with the emotional chaos she felt. 3 days passed before Soo-jin gathered the courage to confront him. She waited until he came home from work, served the dinner she had prepared with special care, and then placed the photographs on the table, next to the fine porcelain plates. Min-ho's face instantly paled. His hands froze in midair, holding the chopsticks, and for a moment that seemed eternal, they stared at each other in silence. She could see the guilt in his eyes, but also something that hurt her even more deeply: relief, as if he was relieved to finally be discovered. Min-ho did not deny it. He didn't offer elaborate explanations or dramatic apologies. He simply lowered his head and admitted that he had been involved with Lee Na-young, a colleague at work, for 6 months. The cruel simplicity of his confession cut Soo-jin's heart more deeply than any lie could have. 2 weeks after discovering the betrayal, Soo-jin began experiencing persistent morning nausea. Initially, she attributed the symptoms to the emotional stress she was facing. She had lost her appetite, slept poorly, and felt constantly exhausted. Her younger sister, Soo-min, suggested she see a doctor. At Dr. Park's office, Soo-jin received the news that would change everything once again. She was 6 weeks pregnant. The irony of the moment did not go unnoticed by her. Just as her marriage was falling apart, she discovered she was carrying a new life. On the way back home, Soo-jin wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her felt an instinctive, protective joy toward the baby growing in her womb. Another part feared how Min-ho would react to the news, especially considering the deteriorated state of their relationship. When Min-ho came home from work that night, he seemed more distant than ever. He had spent the past few days sleeping at the office and avoiding any meaningful conversation with her. Soo-jin prepared chamomile tea for both of them and, with her hands trembling slightly, told him about the pregnancy. His reaction was one of initial shock, followed by an expression she couldn't fully interpret. Min-ho remained silent for several long minutes, staring out the apartment window at the city lights below. When he finally spoke, his words were measured and cold, as if discussing a business deal. The next day, Min-ho did something Soo-jin did not expect. He told his mother, Madam Kim Young-suk, about the pregnancy. The matriarch of the Kim family was a 60-year-old woman, elegant and relentless, who had always treated Soo-jin with a cold politeness that barely concealed her disdain for her daughter-in-law's humble origins. Young-suk arrived at the apartment late in the afternoon, dressed in a Chanel outfit and carrying a designer handbag that cost more than Soo-jin earned in a year when she was still working. Her presence filled the space with palpable tension. The conversation began seemingly civilly, with Young-suk serving tea in antique porcelain cups and talking about the weather. But it soon became clear what the real purpose of her visit was. With a controlled but firm voice, She informed Soo-jin that she was aware of the problems in the marriage and that the pregnancy had come at a very inconvenient time. Young-suk explained that Min-ho was being considered for an important promotion in the company, which could lead him to the presidency in a few years. A divorce scandal, especially with child involved, could harm his chances, she suggested, with a delicacy that did not hide the cruelty of her words, that Soo-jin carefully consider her options. The mother-in-law placed on the coffee table a business card from a discreet private clinic known for its confidentiality and professionalism. She explained that many women from high society turned to their services when they found themselves in delicate situations. The procedure would be quick, safe, and completely confidential. In the days that followed, Soo-jin felt increasingly isolated and pressured. Min-ho, who had initially seemed shocked by the news of the pregnancy, began making subtle remarks about the difficulties of raising a child amid so many marital problems. He casually mentioned how hard it would be for her to raise a child alone, since it seemed inevitable they would get a divorce. He talked about the financial implications, reminding her that she hadn't had her own income for 3 years, and that finding work as a single mother would be extremely challenging. Young-suk started visiting them more frequently, always bringing expensive gifts and treating Soo-jin with an artificial kindness that was more unsettling than her previous coldness. She talked about trips they could take together after Soo-jin resolved her situation, about job opportunities she could arrange for her in companies friendly to the family. The psychological pressure was constant and subtle. There were never direct threats or explicit ultimatums, only a steady stream of suggestions, feigned concerns, and offers of help that always came with the implicit expectation that Soo-jin would make the right decision. During this period, Soo-jin tried to talk to her own family, but found herself unable to fully explain the situation. Her parents, hard-working merchants who had been proud when she married Min-ho, couldn't understand the emotional and social complexity of the situation she was in. 2 weeks of constant pressure began to take their toll. Soo-jin was losing weight, sleeping poorly, and feeling increasingly confused and desperate. The loneliness within her own marriage had become unbearable, especially knowing that Min-ho was continuing his relationship with Na-young. One particularly difficult morning, after a night when Min-ho hadn't come home, Soo-jin found herself alone in the apartment, staring out the window at the life continuing normally on the streets below. People were going to work. Children were running to school. The world went on while hers seemed to have completely stopped. Young-suk arrived at that moment, as if she had a sixth sense for Soo-jin's moments of greatest vulnerability. She brought with her a private doctor, Dr. Kong, whom she introduced as an old family friend, a specialist in discreet women's health care. The doctor was kind and professional, explaining the procedures in a technical and reassuring manner. He assured her that everything would be done with the utmost care, and that she would recover quickly. Young-suk stayed by Soo-jin's side throughout the consultation, holding her hand and talking about how she was making the wisest decision for everyone involved. In a moment of emotional exhaustion and total confusion, Soo-jin consented to the procedure. She signed the papers with trembling hands, feeling as if she were watching herself from outside, as if this were not really her life, her decision. The procedure was performed at an elegant private clinic in the Abgyujong district. Soo-jin woke up from the sedation, feeling a physical and emotional emptiness that hit her like a devastating wave. Still under the effects of the anesthesia, she began to cry uncontrollably, not only because of the changes in her body, but also because of the magnitude of what had just happened. Young-suk was there when she woke, offering words of comfort that sounded completely hollow. She spoke about how brave Soo-jin had been, how she had made the right decision, and how she could now start a new life. But all Soo-jin could feel was a deep, irreversible loss. In the days of recovery that followed, Min-ho showed attentiveness in a way he hadn't demonstrated for months. He brought flowers, prepared soup, and stayed home to take care of her. But Soo-jin could see that his kindness came from guilt, not love. He was being kind because he knew he'd been part of something terrible, not because he wanted to rebuild their marriage. During a silent afternoon, while Min-ho worked on his laptop in the living room, Soo-jin had a devastating realization. She had allowed fear and pressure to make her take a decision that went against all her maternal instincts and personal values. She had sacrificed a fundamental part of herself to try to save a marriage that was already dead. Anger began to grow inside her, slowly at first, but then with a force that surprised her. It wasn't just anger at Minho for betraying her, or at Young-suk for manipulating her. It was anger at herself for having been weak at the moment she needed to be strongest. 1 week after the procedure, Soo-jin made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She was going to leave, not just the apartment, but the entire life she had built based on other people's expectations. She began making plans in secret. She sought out a divorce lawyer, a strong woman named Advocate Lee, who specialized in helping women in vulnerable situations. The lawyer explained her rights and the available options, including the possibility of financial compensation due to the circumstances of the separation. Soo-jin also started looking for a job discreetly. Her 3 years away from the job market had left her skills somewhat outdated, but she discovered that her previous experience in graphic design still held value. A small advertising agency in the Hongdae district was willing to give her a chance as a freelancer. Meanwhile, she watched Minho continue his life as if nothing had happened. He went back to working late, taking business trips that probably included meetings with Na-young, and treating Soo-jin with the same distant politeness as always. The hypocrisy of the situation fueled her determination to leave. Young-suk also continued her visits, but now their conversations revolve around plans for the future, including the possibility of Soo-jin returning to work in something suitable for her position as Minho's wife. The matriarch seemed satisfied to have resolved the problem of the unwanted pregnancy and was now focused on maintaining the appearance of a perfect family. 3 weeks after leaving the clinic, Soo-jin began to experience familiar symptoms again: morning nausea, sensitivity to smells, a fatigue that went beyond the emotional exhaustion she had been feeling. Initially, she attributed these symptoms to post-traumatic stress from the procedure and the tension of planning her escape. But when the symptoms persisted and intensified, she decided to take a home pregnancy test, more to rule out the possibility than to truly believe she could be pregnant. The positive result left her in complete shock. Rushing to Dr. Park's office, Soo-jin discovered something that changed everything again. She had been pregnant with twins. The procedure had affected only one of the babies, and the other had survived. Dr. Park explained that although rare, this sometimes happened in multiple pregnancies, especially in the early stages. The remaining baby was developing normally and appeared healthy, despite the trauma Soo-jin's body had endured. The doctor reassured her that the pregnancy could proceed normally, but recommended more frequent monitoring due to the special circumstances. Soo-jin left the office in a state of complex emotional shock. Part of her felt an intense, protective joy, as if the universe had given her a second chance. Another part was terrified of what this would mean for her plans to leave and for Minho and Young-suk's reactions. During the following 2 weeks, Soo-jin kept the secret of the pregnancy to herself. She continued her preparations to leave, but now with renewed urgency. She knew she had to get out before her condition became obvious, before Minho and Young-suk found out and tried to pressure her again. She finalized the divorce papers with Advocate Lee, who was shocked to learn about the manipulation Soo-jin had suffered. The lawyer assured her that Soo-jin would be entitled to substantial compensation, especially considering the coercive circumstances she had faced. Soo-jin also found a small apartment in Hongdae, near the agency where she would start working. It was modest compared to the luxury she had lived in with Minho, but it was hers. She could decorate it however she wanted, live by her own schedule, make her own decisions. During this time, she observed Minho with a clarity she hadn't had before. She saw how he avoided looking her in the eyes, how his displays of affection were mechanical and guilt-ridden, how he seemed relieved whenever she left the house. She realized he was also preparing for the end of the marriage, probably planning to make his relationship with Na-young official as soon as the divorce was finalized. His hypocrisy and cowardice strengthened her resolve. He had taken part in pressuring her to do something that went against her conscience, but didn't have the courage to take responsibility for his actions or fight for their marriage. On the eve of her planned departure, Soo-jin decided to tell Minho about the pregnancy, not because she wanted reconciliation or hoped he would change, but because she felt he needed to know the truth about the consequences of his actions. She waited until he came home from work and prepared the last meal they would have together during the silent dinner. She observed the man she had been married to for 3 years and tried to remember when she had stopped loving him. She realized that love had died gradually, not with the betrayal, but with every small display of selfishness and cowardice he had shown over the years. After dinner, she told him about the pregnancy. Minho's reaction was one of absolute shock, followed by something that seemed like panic. He immediately suggested she contact Dr. Kong again, that they repeat the procedure. His automatic response, his inability to consider any other option, confirmed to Soo-jin that she was making the right decision by leaving. She calmly informed Minho that she had decided to divorce and keep the baby. She explained that she had already found a lawyer, an apartment, and a job. She said the divorce papers would be delivered to him the following week, and that she wanted nothing more than what she was legally entitled to. Minho tried to argue, talking about scandal, financial difficulties, and how hard it would be for her to raise a child alone. But Soo-jin had heard all those arguments before, and they no longer held power over her. She had found an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. Soo-jin moved into her new apartment a week later. It was a small but bright space, with large windows overlooking a busy street in Hongdae. For the first time in years, she decorated a space according to her own tastes, choosing vibrant colors and comfortable furniture instead of the cold elegance that Young Suk had imposed on her previous life. Work at the advertising agency started slowly, with small projects and local clients. But Soo-jin discovered that her recent life experience had added depth to her creative work. Her campaigns had an emotional honesty that resonated with clients, and soon she began receiving bigger projects. During the first weeks of her new life, Soo-jin faced moments of doubt and fear. Sometimes, lying alone in her new bed, she wondered if she had made the right decision. Raising a child alone would be challenging, especially in society that still harshly judged single mothers. But then she felt the baby move inside her, and all doubt disappeared. This child was her miracle, her second chance, her opportunity to do things the right way. She talked to the baby every night, promising that he would never feel unwanted, that he would always know he was chosen and loved. Meanwhile, Minho was discovering that life without Soo-jin was not what he had imagined. His relationship with Na-young, which had seemed so exciting when it was forbidden, became tense and complicated once it became official. Na-young was ambitious and demanding, constantly pressuring him about when they would formalize their union and about the career opportunities he could create for her within the company. Soo-jin's absence in his daily life became painfully obvious. No one else organized his personal schedule, prepared his favorite meals, or took care of the details that made his life run smoothly. He had taken all of that for granted, never realizing how much he depended on her until she was no longer there. Worse still was the guilt that consumed him over the lost pregnancy and the circumstances that led to it. In quiet moments, especially late at night, he found himself thinking about how he had pressured Soo-jin, allowed his mother to manipulate her, and how he had been a coward when she needed support the most. Young Suk, for her part, was furious with how events had unfolded. She had invested years trying to mold Soo-jin into the perfect daughter-in-law, and now all that work had been lost. Worse still, the divorce was generating exactly the kind of scandal she had tried to avoid, especially as details about the coercion related to pregnancy began to circulate discreetly within their social circles. As the months passed, Soo-jin flourished in her new life. Her belly grew, as did her confidence and independence. She made new friends at the agency and in the neighborhood, people who knew her for who she truly was, not as Minho's wife or Young Suk's daughter-in-law. Her family finally understood the situation when she explained everything in detail during a visit. Her mother cried upon learning about the pressure she had faced, and her father expressed pride in her courage to start over. They promised full support, especially after the baby was born. Soo-jin's work continued to evolve. She developed a specialty in campaigns for small women-led businesses, using her own experience of starting over to create authentic and powerful messages. Her reputation grew, and she began receiving invitations to speak about female entrepreneurship and overcoming adversity. During this time, Minho tried to contact her several times. He sent messages asking to talk, flowers with apology cards, even expensive gifts for the baby. But Soo-jin maintained her decision to cut off all contact. She had learned that some bridges need to be burned for new structures to be built. Kim Soo-ah was born on a sunny spring morning when the cherry blossoms in Seoul were in full bloom. The delivery was challenging, but the moment Soo-jin held her daughter in her arms, she felt that her life had finally found its true purpose. The baby was perfect, with curious eyes and a strong cry that seemed to announce her determination to live fully. Soo-jin looked at that little face and saw not only her daughter, but also her own redemption. Proof that she had made the right decisions even when everyone around her said otherwise. During the first months of motherhood, Soo-jin worked from home, balancing baby care and freelance projects. It was challenging, but she never felt overwhelmed. Every smile from Soo-ah, every developmental milestone, reinforced the conviction that she had chosen the right path. Her sister Soo-min moved nearby to help, and together they created a support system that worked perfectly. Soo-jin discovered that being a single mother did not mean being alone. It meant having the freedom to choose her own support network based on love and mutual respect, not family or social obligations. When Soo-ah turned 6 months old, Soo-jin made a decision that surprised many. She opened her own design agency. With savings from the divorce settlement and a small business loan, she rented a small office in Hongdae and hired 2 employees. The agency specialized in helping women entrepreneurs build their brands. 3 years after leaving her marriage, Soo-jin was in her office, now expanded to occupy an entire floor of a modern building. Her agency had become one of the most respected in Seoul in the field of branding for small businesses, especially those run by women. Soo-ah, now a child of almost 3 years old, played in the little kids' corner that Soo-jin had created in the office. The girl was smart, curious, and full of life, exactly as her mother had hoped she would be. She didn't know her father, and Soo-jin had decided she would tell the full story when Soo-ah was old enough to understand. That particular day, Soo-jin received an unexpected call. It was Min-ho. His voice sounded different, more mature, filled with regret that had grown over the years. He explained that his relationship with Na-young had ended 2 years before, that he had undergone therapy to deal with his personal issues, and that he would like to talk about Soo-ah. Soo-jin listened in silence, watching her daughter play as Min-ho spoke about regret, about how he had realized too late what he had lost, and how he wished he had the chance to meet his daughter and maybe, someday, earn Soo-jin's forgiveness. When he finished speaking, Soo-jin responded in a calm and confident voice. She said she would consider allowing him to meet Soo-ah, but only if he proved over time that he had truly changed. She explained that her priority would always be her daughter's well-being, not his redemption. After ending the call, Soo-jin looked out the window of her office at the city that had truly become her home. She had built a life based on her own choices, her own values, her own strength. She had transformed pain into power, betrayal into independence, loss into gain. Soo-ah ran to her at that moment, climbing into her lap with a drawing she had made. It was a colorful figure of 2 people holding hands under a rainbow. When Soo-jin asked who the people in the drawing were, Soo-ah replied with the simplicity of childhood. It was her and her mother, and they were happy. At that moment, Soo-jin knew with absolute certainty that she had made all the right decisions. She had paid a high price for her freedom and independence, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable: the ability to live on her own terms and to raise a daughter who would grow up knowing her worth did not depend on others' approval. Soo-jin's story was one of loss and rebirth, of weakness transformed into strength, of an ending that was actually a beginning. She had learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover who you really are, and that the courage to start over can lead to a more authentic and fulfilling life than anything you ever had before. As the sun set over Seoul, Soo-jin hugged her daughter and smiled. They had built together something beautiful and lasting, something no one could take away from them. The future lay open before them, full of possibilities limited only by their own imagination and determination. The journey had been difficult, marked by betrayal, manipulation, and loss, but it had led to something precious: a strong mother raising a strong daughter. 2 generations of women who would never allow others to define their worth or determine their destiny. And that, Soo-jin knew, was the greatest triumph of all. And so we come to the end of Yoon Soo-jin's story, a woman who discovered that sometimes we need to lose everything to find our true strength. Her journey teaches us that no matter how dark the night is, There is always a possibility of a new dawn for those who have the courage to fight for it. The most powerful lesson of this story is that our greatest strength does not come from happy moments, but from how we choose to rise after the most painful falls. Soo-jin shows us that when the people around us try to diminish us or control our choices, especially those that affect our own bodies and futures, we have the right and duty to say no, even when that means standing alone. She learned that self-love is not selfishness, but a necessity, that protecting our dreams and values is not stubbornness, but wisdom, and that creating an authentic life, even if more difficult, is infinitely more rewarding than living a comfortable lie. Soo-jin's story also reminds us that our children observe not only what we say, but how we live. By choosing courage over convenience, she not only saved herself, but also gave her daughter the example of a woman who never settles for less than she deserves. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this emotional journey of pain, growth, and redemption? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between pleasing others and being true to yourself? Did Soo-jin's story touch your heart in a special way? Tell me in the comments which part of the story moved you the most and what lesson you will take to your own life. Your opinion is very important to me. And if this story has stirred any emotion in you, if it made you reflect on strength, courage, and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our upcoming exciting stories, always full of drama, romance, and life lessons that help us grow as people. Until the next story, and remember, you are stronger than you think and deserve a life that is truly yours.